I suppose the first thing to say about Battlefield 1 in general and about this first weapon in particular is it was never used. There are so many guns in Battlefield 1 that barely exist. I almost think of it as a sort of steampunk alternate reality First World War that I'm playing in when I play BF1. That's out of the way. The Hellriegel it's probably the least real gun in the game, in the sense that there's no real example. There are only some really nicely taken photos of, I mean, for all I know, the only prototype. And that's the nice thing about BF1, is it does showcase these roads not traveled, if you like. The Hellriegel is one of these very early attempts at a submachine gun before we really know what a submachine gun is. And it's got a box to contain a belt of ammunition. And I don't believe the box is attached to the weapon. Feel free to chide me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, which means it's a light machine gun firing a pistol-type cartridge, more than it is a submachine gun as we see it used in the game. But I totally see why they went for it. Pause. Burkhardt C93. This is a really, really nice self-loading pistol from the 1890s, as the name as the designation would imply. Designed by Hugo Burkhardt, who would go on with Georg Luger to create the Luger pistol. It shares a lot of features. Push-button magazine release, we see that being used in the game, with a sort of jaunty kick of the hand to throw out the magazine. That would work. That's quite a slack fit in there. At the time, I imagine it would have been a more sedate, remove the magazine, replace the magazine. Speed reloads were not a thing in 1918. And the way we see it used in the game there is one hand, like this, pretty much. And you see that the mainspring and a lot of the bolt is hanging over the back of the hand. Doesn't look and feel too awkward when you're playing BF1, but in real life, this thing is incredibly unbalanced. So we've got the M1918, Modello 1918 Beretta submachine gun. Well depicted in the game, I think. I don't know the rate of fire specifically for this, but it stands to reason it would be quite high. The bolt is quite small. Top-mounted magazine, as we see there. The reload, again from memory and from the video, doesn't look too bad, but as you can see here, there's a lug on the back of the magazine, and it rocks in forward. In the reload animation, it seems to me a bit more like they're jamming it in straight from the top, which wouldn't work. You wouldn't get your gun reloaded that way. But yeah, so this has perhaps more right to be in BF1 than other guns in the game, and it's rumored, suggested that some made it to the front in 1918 with the Italian army. I would have to err on the side of caution and say this was too late for the First World War, but only just. Pause it there. Now, the Bergmann MP18 definitely did see use in the First World War, and it's typically credited as the only submachine gun that saw service in the First World War, and the first true submachine gun to see military service. So absolutely, we'd expect to see this in BF1, and it's well depicted. The rate of fire, it sort of chugs along as you'd expect, and as it does. I've been fortunate enough to fire one of these. In fact, if you look at the Royal Armoury's YouTube channel, we did some slow-mo shooting with one a few years ago. A quick pause. I've got to quickly whinge about the optional accessories, optical sights and things in BF1. It makes me sad when I see a Bergmann with a sort of Galilean optical sight on it. It just doesn't make any sense. Even conventional steel tube, glass lens optical sights for sniper rifles were not super common. But all nations didn't really get around to issuing optical sights en masse until the last couple of years of the war. This is why I get killed in BF1, because I insist on using period correct setups. And I'm not very good. I'm going to pause there. Where to start? It's a real gun, as I'm sure people have already Googled. A 2.7mm bullet, incredibly small. And the gun itself is incredibly small, so the actual cartridge length is tiny as well. Just to get it out of the way, this thing would have 0 stopping power. A bullet of that incredibly lightweight, traveling at that very low speed, is not pulling off headshots at 50 meters or whatever we just saw. I have to chuckle at the dainty way that the character handles the thing and sort of squeezes it between his thumb and forefinger. So as you can see, as you will have seen from other videos on this, I'm sure, it is tiny. It's as tiny as it's seen on screen. In fact, I think it's tinier. As to how it works in the game, yeah, they've got that right. Imagine doing this in Under Fire. Press the magazine catch, tab on the base to pull the magazine out, and then with a tiny belt of magazines or something, push in a fresh one, and yes, it cocks as it does in the game. It's a real gun, but it's not a real gun in the sense that it doesn't kill anyone, but it might irritate them, I suppose.
We have taken objective Edward.
The SMLE is probably the rifle I've used most in BF1 myself. I haven't played a huge amount of it, but I tend to favor it because it's British, it's period correct, and I like role-playing as a hapless British soldier who dies a lot, which means I'm running around with the infantry rifle with no scope on it. We also saw it with a scope. That was used on the Canadian Ross rifle. I've never seen an SMLE with a Warner and Swayze sight on it. Otherwise, the SMLE is quite well done. It looks right, feels right. The user, in this case, I think it's a German, is using the bolt incorrectly. Always between finger and thumb, up, back and out, forward and down. In almost, when you see people that know how to shoot a bolt action rifle, especially a Lee Enfield with this technique, it's like clack, clack. They could pretty much fire as fast, aim shots as a self-loading rifle.
We have lost objective Duff.
Okay, pause. The Thompson is a definite no-no for the First World War. It was very much a product of the First World War. It was this idea of a trench broom. Colonel Thompson's, he coined the term submachine gun. And he had prototypes up and running as early as 1919, which is what roughly we're seeing here. The very first prototype was the Annihilator, which is the name that's used in the game. The model used in BF1 with the slotted cooling forend over the barrel is a later prototype, and it has features of different prototypes. But given that it didn't exist at that time in that context, it's not a huge problem to change it up. The lack of a buttstock is correct for the time, and even the model 1921 Thompson, you press a button, the stock comes off. The Thompson's a bit of an ergonomic nightmare, certainly by modern standards. So the original idea of two pistol grips and the back end hanging out with no stock on it, and you look where you're aiming, fits the gameplay of BF1. But too early for the Annihilator. The Burton, or the Winchester Burton, as it's possibly more correctly known, is a really fascinating weapon. There's only one that still exists. Unfortunately, there's very little in the way of archival information that's survived with it in terms of development, trials, that kind of thing. As depicted in the game, sort of, it's intended as a balloon buster, but there was also a ground roll barrel with a bayonet lug on it. So that the balloon buster round would light the thing on fire, ignite the hydrogen within. The normal bullet would act like a normal bullet. And the BF1 seeks to depict that by having one magazine loaded with the incendiary rounds that do more damage against planes, and one magazine loaded with the anti-personnel rounds, as they effectively were. So sort of period appropriate, because it's designed in 1917, so correct time frame, but there's only one ever made as far as we know. It never made it as far as the trenches or anywhere else in the First World War. The twin magazines give it that very steampunky appearance, I believe, are just intended to give you more ammunition on board. There'd be no real world reason, I don't think, to have one magazine with aircraft rounds and one with infantry, but it's a neat idea from DICE there. Very cool gun to have in the game, but one of the least likely things to get shot by in the First World War. This is a really weird one. Well, I didn't notice when I first played the campaign on Battlefield 1 until I checked, shout out to Internet Movie Firearms Database, who had spotted that the Villar Perosa that's in BF1 is not a Villar Perosa. It's the movie prop from the film The Sicilian. Bapty & Co. were and are a major movie armourer who supply all sorts of firearms and other stuff to the movies, and they provided this mocked up Villar Perosa from two Beretta 1938s upside down and bodged together. Here is a regular, not that any of these are very regular because they're quite rare, Villar Perosa. Now, you can call it a submachine gun if you want. It's really not. The thing that makes it not a submachine gun is the fact that it doesn't have, and never did have, as far as I know, a shoulder stock. So by most definitions, that would not be a submachine gun. Being two guns welded together, it's really too heavy and awkward to be running around with. And of course, you've got a bipod hanging off the front. You could get rid of that. Thanks for watching, guys. That was the guns of Battlefield 1. I hope you enjoyed my ramblings about the various inaccuracies of those weapons. And I hope you'll join us again for a video in the future. Difficult times for museums at the moment, so if you feel you could spare a little bit of cash, we do have a donation link in the description above for the Royal Armouries. There's even a membership program if you'd like to go that route, but we just appreciate you engaging with our collection.